Call, please.
Yes, I'm gonna start with Mike Picardi, who I don't see. Mayor Keep,
Here, I'm here.
thank you. Stacy Rizzo is absent. Dr. Kelly,
Here.
Carl Svensson,
Linda, you're kind of hard to hear. I don't know if you can lean into the microphone a little bit.
Carl Svensson, are you here?
I see him.
He's actually sitting right next to me. He's here.
Okay. Christopher Bowen, I don't see. I'm gonna note him as absent, and Jennifer Hayes is no longer on the committee. Rich Biscay,
Kyle, say yours.
I'm here.
thank you, Carl.
Here.
Thank you, Rich. And Dr. Kelly, you mentioned that Don Sermola was not able to make it. Nick Rystrom,
Here.
Jerry Visconti,
Here.
Susan Gravellisi,
Here.
and Joanne is also absent, Joanne McKenna. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll start off with housekeeping items. We actually, we already voted on the April 13th meeting minutes, so we are looking for a vote to approve meeting minutes from the April 26th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. I will do a roll call for that. Mayor Keep,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Biscay,
Here. Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
and Susan Gravellisi.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next, we are going to move on to the April invoices for processing, and I can pull up the cover sheet. Or Brian, did you want to jump in if I pull up the last and final package?
Yeah, if you could, I actually don't have that open right now, but if you could jump into the package, then I just, we'll look at the budget, look at the invoices, the invoice cover sheet, and then I just want to quickly throw the cash flow, which I do have open on the screen.
Yeah. So we have invoices catching us up through April 30th. So when we had spoken before, we typically go through and just show the overall budget, project budget for the feasibility study. Are you guys able to read this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the original feasibility budget that we had was the $2 million, and then we have the changes of the additional feasibility for $2.3 million. So the total project budget now for feasibility is 4.3, and we have spent 2,164,250 so far. And the invoices that were attached to the email, the secondary one, which I'm going to pull up next. It should change the screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we're recapping invoices from left field for November, December, January, February, March, and April. And then we have March and April invoices for Perkins Eastman, and then we have Consigli pre-construction services for January, February, March, and April, which brings us to the total of the 261,351.
And so I just wanted to note on this, and I'm going to throw something on the screen in a minute. But the Left field and consigli billings here catch us up to date, pretty much expend everything up until this month. And they're part of the new contract amendments that this committee did approve last month and have been fully executed by the city. The two Perkins Eastman items here are completing billing on the original $2 million budget. So the Perkins Eastman one's still working, capping off the services from the original budget. The left field and consigli are working off the new budget. And Linda, I just wanted to throw one thing on the screen quick before we seek a motion to approve here. Let me find it. So this was my Zoom stuff's in the way. 1 second. So this was the cash flow for the revised $2.3 million feasibility study that we showed you before when we were approving these contract amendments. Everything to the left of this line is what's on the invoice summary for left field tonight. The left field's total 126, consigli's total 69,252. And as you can see on the new $2.3 million budget, which is the cash flow on the screen, there are no Perkins Eastman billings. We're still, as I said, catching up on expending the original budget. So we're going to sort of track this on a month-to-month basis. The left field lines here, these top lines, are going to bill exactly as you see them. The consigli lines are going to bill exactly as you see them. The cash flow month to month for the design team is a little more complicated contract, a lot more sub consultants in there. This billing will vary month to month. It's more based on percentage of certain tasks, but I think this is something good that we'll come back to. And as noted before, we approved all these amendments. The three new amendments within the $2.3 million budget total $2.0 million. So there is a $268,000 contingency, uncommitted contingency in this budget, plus a few $1,000s left over from the original budget. So I just wanted to sort of graphically put this on the screen. I think this is helpful just to see where we're going in 2023 out to this red line, which is the end of the preferred schematic report, and then out in 2024, end of April, plus or minus the end of the new schematic design. And we will go more in depth into the schedule in a few minutes, but I just wanted to splash this on the screen before we look to approve invoices.
Brian, I just want to say that's a very helpful way to look at the budget. So thank you for that. And on the monthlies, on the invoices, we'll see the breakdown specifically for Perkins Eastman, where they're a little bit more complicated than left field or consigli. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. We'll be able to, and the left field and consigli ones are, as I said, always going to be the same. We'll probably throw the Perkins Eastman one up on the screen just to show progress through the subtasks that are isolated in their contract.
And I'd just like to point out to the committee, and I know left field and the city agree, in the future going forward, we don't really want to see invoices from previous months. We want to keep them current. What happened, as everybody knows, is we had some very extenuating circumstances for the last 6 months, and so this was necessary. But it's not something you generally want to see on a project. You want to see things that are current, and if in fact there is some issue about payment or what's owed, you try to deal with that in real time.
Agreed, 100%. Thanks, Joe. Any questions on the budget side of this or the invoices? Otherwise, I forgot the exact number, Linda, but we'd be looking to approve the invoices totaling that number you had on the screen that I already forgot.
Yeah, I'll pull it up if somebody wants to make the motion.
So, and actually, as a matter of practice, we need to take up each invoice separately because they all exceed the $10,000 allowable. We need a roll call vote on each one.
Okay, want to try
So
to blitz
it
through
might
that?
be helpful though, if the committee all wants to agree that, you know, one person will make the motion and a second person will second them all. And that can help, at least we won't have that delay of who's going to make the motion and Linda could just read the invoice and the motion maker could say so moved. And the other designated person could say second, and then would have to do a roll call for each one.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So if we start with left field's invoice number 22, which is for services for November 2022 in the amount of $21,000.
All right, I'll be the motion maker. I'm gonna say so moved.
Perfect. Second,
Anybody? Okay,
And Susan is second. Okay, perfect. Thank you. We'll do a roll call for Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Biscay, was that a yes? I'm sorry. Rich Biscay, would you mind confirming that that was a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yeah.
Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Okay, we will move on to left field's invoice number 23 for services for December 2022 in the amount of $21,000.
so moved.
second,
Thank you. Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Biscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
and Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Thank you. Moving on to left field's invoice number 24 for services for January 2023 in the amount of $21,000.
so moved.
second,
Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Thank you. Moving on to left field's invoice number 25, which is for services for February 2023 in the amount of $21,000.
so moved.
second,
Thank you. Roll call, Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
thank you. Susan Gravellisi,
yes,
thank you. Moving on to left field's invoice number 26 for services for March 2023 in the amount of $21,000.
so moved.
second,
Thank you. Roll call, Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Biscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
and Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Moving on to left field's invoice number 27 for services for April 2023 in the amount of $21,000.
so moved.
second,
Thank you. Roll call, Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Biscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Ye-
and Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Thank you. Moving on to Perkins Eastman's invoice number 25 for services for March 2023 in the amount of $28,900.
so moved.
second,
Thank you. Roll call for Mayor Keefe,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes,
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Viscae,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti.
Yeah.
And Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Thank you. Moving to the next, Perkins Eastman invoice number 26 for services for April 2023 in the amount of $37,199.13.
So moved.
second,
Thank you. Roll call, starting with Mayor Keefe,
yes,
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Viscae,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti.
Yeah.
And Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Wonderful. Moving on to consiglies, invoice number 4 for services for January 2023 in the amount of $23,084.
So moved.
second,
Thank you. Mayor Keefe,
yes,
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Viscae,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
yes,
Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Moving to consiglies invoice number 5 for services for February 2023 in the amount of $23,084.
So moved.
second,
Thank you. Roll call, Mayor Keefe,
yes,
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Viscae,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti.
Yeah.
And Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
And last but not least, moving to consiglies invoice number 6 for March and April services in the amount of $23,084.
So moved.
second,
Thank you. Mayor Keefe,
yes,
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Rich Viscae,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
yes.
and Susan Gravellisi.
yes,
Apologies, the wind just kicked in and it's howling through my window over here.
Nicely done.
Thank you very much, everyone. That covers all the invoices needed to catch us up. And we will continue for next month with only monthly invoices.
And I'll just say a quick thank you to Left Field and Perkins Eastman and Consigli for sticking with us through these last 6 months without payment while we figured ourselves out. So thank you for your patience.
Appreciate that. Still glad to be here. Okay, so I'm gonna take over the screen here. And we're just the agenda, and again, my Zoom's in the way. We're gonna run through a draft schedule for the next, pretty much covers the whole project, but I am gonna stress that this schedule is gonna be a living, breathing document, particularly for the next few weeks as we really chunk it down into a meeting by meeting work plan, but definitely wanted to run through it tonight. There's a lot to do in the next 8 months and 12 months. Then we're going to have a quick discussion about restarting working groups, the design working groups, and a site working group that will be a relatively quick discussion. So I'm going to bring up the latest and greatest version of the document that went to you folks Monday. There's a little, the important dates are all the same here, but we've added some subtasks here that we're going to be hitting in the next few months. So I'm going to try to keep my eye out for hands popping up, but feel free to just interrupt me as I go through this. We're going to talk a lot about probably the most time is what we're doing the next 8 months. That's this big blue bar here, gets us through pretty much December with some MSBA follow-up. Then schematic design runs us from next April out to some important votes in July. And then when we get down below this big black line, high level here, everything below the black line is after this new feasibility study. And everything below this black line is the most subject to change here. Anything we learn above the black line might push and pull some dates down below. but we at least wanted to start off with a sort of a well thought out schedule here that the team sort of looked at and debated. So let me just run you through now through December, and then I'll sort of pause and we'll go forward from that. So starting on May 1st, we all buckled down on revisiting the existing site in terms of design elements and how to go about this site. There's going to be surveys of the entire site happening in the coming months, geotechnical, geoenvironmental, asbestos containing materials investigation. We're going to revisit everything we know about this site and learn more based on it being the one site that we're working on now. We're going to kick a study about the culvert into gear. That needs a little bit more work with ourselves and Nick, Dawn, Carl, etc. We'll be having the team revisiting a permitting roadmap and also defining the Article 97 process that we will need to undergo at the state level to build on the parks. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. The site working group, we'll also talk about this a little bit more in the design working group. We're going to kick that back into gear. Right now, we're assuming pretty much the same crowd of folks on the site working group: Carl, Nick, Dawn. If anyone else wants to join in on that, we can accommodate that as long as we don't trip a quorum of the building committee. So we'll talk a little bit more about the design related and site committees after this agenda item. And if anyone else wants to be involved with that, just let us know.
Brian,
Yes, sir.
can I ask you a question before you
Yeah.
move on?
Yep.
Is it possible to have non-building committee people on these subgroups, or do they have to be people from the building committee?
Be anybody the committee wants. Does not have to be a committee member.
Okay.
They're not.
So I
subcommittees.
know we're not forming that team right now tonight, so maybe we could put that on the agenda for the next meeting. I would like the committee to think about other people who should be in these groups. Like, I think the site working group should include somebody from the city's public safety department. Because I think that's going to be a concern once there's construction happening there.
Sure.
But that, these are things that we can talk about if when it's a formal agenda item of who do we think needs to go on the site working group and the design working group to engage more people.
Sounds good to me. Good ideas. The site working group will sort of be involved with all this traffic and on-site circulation, but we wanted to give that its own sort of home here. That obviously is going to be a really big topic on this site. We're also going to be revisiting mechanical, electrical, plumbing, MEP systems. Carl, obviously, and Carl's people at the head of that, but we will have some other people involved. And again, summaries of all this will flow to the building committee as we're working through this. But I really just wanted to give a high-level summary of the things that the team is already attacking that are going to take a little bit of time to get to you, and for updates to get to you, and then to other committees to the city. But we are looking to hold a meeting in June where Dan can talk about this a little bit more later, but Perkins Eastman's already started approaching the site with some new design ideas, and we would look for our June meeting. We'll get something out to you a week in advance. We'd really like to come away from the June meeting with the goal is what are the options that we're looking at on site? There might be a few. If you remember back a year ago, there was a scheme to renovate piece of the field house and not put athletics in the new building. But I think that still could be something we discuss. There were reasons that was eliminated, but I think this is more going to be about different options for the building. And one of them I think you should expect is some options with the building going higher than 4 stories. And that's going to be an important thing for us all to consider because it tightens up the footprint of the building, gives us some relief in terms of traffic flow, parking, setbacks from the neighbors, et cetera. So we'll have some options out to you before this meeting, but the June meeting I think is mostly going to focus on, we'd like to pin down the handful of options that are then going to be hammered away at over the following months.
Brian, just on that last comment you made about going up higher, so that would make it a 5-story building, is that right?
5, maybe 6.
Could even be
really,
6, Diane.
Yep.
That's
And-
kind of what we're looking at as option potential options is like, how can we tighten this up enough to keep it away from some of the constraints, back it off some of the neighbors, and have enough land around and the property around to move around the site better than some of the other options we had out there earlier.
I'm just
So-
trying to imagine kids traversing 5 flights to get from one class to the next, or to get from the cafeteria to a science lab, or whatever the case may be. Do you know
Yeah,
of, do you guys have any comparables, like other
We do.
schools that are 6 stories high that you could share with us?
Yeah, we do, and even some even taller is what we ended up doing. Many of you have seen Nazra come to some of these meetings before.
Mhm.
She's actually in the studio, the K-12 studio in New York City. And we have another designer who we've brought in to also kind of help guide and give other ideas about kind of these taller buildings. Because in New York, as you would imagine, many of these buildings become 7, 8, 10 stories. That's not going to be this big, but we felt like some of that maybe feel of what they usually do and how they create vertical spaces inside these kinds of buildings would be helpful here.
And I want to stress that it'll be an option. There'll be a 4-story option, so we can weigh it against. I'm not saying we're going higher. I'm saying we want to challenge the design of the building and the site design with showing you an option of going higher. So moving ahead, this is sort of a little bit of a loaded line that I'm just going to throw in red here. This is update options and present progress. This is what's going to run from June out till September. And why I say it's loaded is we're going to flush out these items here. There's probably going to be public outreach. There'll certainly be city council ways and means updates. So a lot of work, then the bulk of the rubber hitting the road on developing the design options and, looking at MEP systems, developing massing, fenestration materials, developing the site, working out the schedules and how each option would be phased. That's all what the team is going to be hot and heavy on for about 3 months leading into September. That doesn't mean we all go away. We'll be having meetings to update you on all that, not necessarily to make decisions, but to get input. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. We'll start making decisions a little further down the schedule. So I did just want to highlight that this will be flushed out in a full work plan. We'll have every meeting plotted, and if there's a desire to do public outreach, if the desire for monthly city updates, we'll work that all out and we'll get it all scheduled. But this leads towards having final design documents. So what we at least say in the industry is, pencils down on the design ideas by the first week or so of September. What that will allow us to do is start working on the PSR report, is the big multi-100-page document that ultimately has to describe this whole process and summarize the options. We're going to start working on that and piecemeal over these months, showing you pieces of it. So when it comes together down below, and we're asking you to approve it, you've already seen it. We're also, the 9/8 date allows us to kick it into gear with estimating. That we will work out the estimates with the 2 estimators, with Consigli and Dan's estimator PM&C in September. We'll reconcile those estimates. If we have to perform value engineering tasks, we have a few weeks dedicated to that in early October. And the idea is by the middle of October, we, the team, have the costs for the options pinned down in current dollars in concert with the schedule for each option. And we would look to then create the total project budget. The construction costs drive so many other costs that we really have to lock down the building and construction costs, then input that to the big MSBA budget. This more or less sets up for the design team is in left field, and Consigli has a goal of getting final presentations out by the last week, 3rd week, 4th week in October. So pencils down, beginning of September, all the information flushed out with costs and schedules and presentations to you, to the city council, to the school committee, so you can start chewing on them in October. This then is sort of how we envision the sequence of approvals here. We would look to meet a week or more after those final presentations go out not to make decisions, but to really get input from the building committee, school committee, city council. I've plus or minus, I know these city council meetings aren't scheduled yet, but I sort of extrapolated the dates. These might vary a bit, but it's at least setting up the idea. As these meetings get booked, we'll tweak these dates and make them work. But send out the presentations end of October, have a meeting end of October, beginning of November to review the final numbers, the final options, the final designs. And then in the middle of November, before Thanksgiving, ask the committees to, the building committee ultimately runs a vote on the preferred option. This is why we'd like time back here for the building committee, school committee, city council, any subcommittees of city council that need to weigh in, get the opinions out. We can summarize those opinions. We're looking for selection of the new preferred option middle of November, which we envision to be a joint meeting with school committee, and then trying to get to the meeting before Thanksgiving to approve the preferred option with the city. We would then pack sort of the last pieces of why the preferred option was chosen into the report that we'll be drafting and showing you updates from months back. I think ultimately we're going to turn that into a table of contents and check off items to say, you've already seen all these items. Here's what's new at the end of November, because it sort of gets tight in here. We're looking to distribute the full report, that multi-100-page document that says the process we went through, talks about all the options, talks about why the committee selected them at the right around or after Thanksgiving, and then looking for votes from the building committee, school committee, and city council at the end of November and early December to authorize submission of the document. So review the options end of October, select the option middle of November, okay the report for submission to MSBA end of November, beginning of December. That sets up the MSBA board dates aren't officially published for next year, and this date could vary a little, but historically this is when somewhere between the 14th and 28th is when it'll be due to them. So any final touches that we want to put on the report, we'll do. We'll submit it. I need to speak a little bit more with MSBA to confirm some of these dates, because we're plugging dates on the calendar that doesn't exist yet for next year, but they'll have some questions and responses come back. The project will attend their facilities assessment subcommittee meetings, most likely in January, February. And this December submission will lead to an end of February, maybe first week in March, depending on how it all works out, board approval. However, what I want to stress here is the design team and left field will be running through all these meetings. However, when we finish this presentation and really just selection of the preferred option in November, the team is going to proceed with the initial pieces of schematic design. So as we get down into schematic design here, it seems a little bit crowded, but just as this month and next month are going to be the balls in the team's court, we have to get things developed to show you. We're going to start developing those items on the preferred option right after you pick it, so we can roll right into schematic design. This is why this date is November. We're seeing the teams working on schematic design after these preferred options, after the report's distributed for the final votes. That design development for SD will run through the beginning of March. Then we'll repeat another series of estimating, putting, dotting the final I's, crossing the final T's on the schematic design report and budget, see if anything's changed since the end of this year to the beginning of next year. And we'd be ultimately looking for city and committee approval in the middle of April to submit for a date that we think will be the end of April. Again, these dates aren't official yet with MSBA, but schematic will go in to MSBA middle of April. Some point following that, they will issue a project scope and budget agreement.
So Brian, sorry, I'm going to pause you for a minute because you've said a lot already.
Yep.
I'm wondering if Mayor Keefe or if Councilor Visconti have any feedback on this timeline around how the council will react to it so that we don't end up where we did this year.
Dr. Kelly, this is Patrick.
Yep, we can hear you.
I guess I would lean more on what Councilor Visconti thinks. The council, we seem to be on a good pace before, and then things changed. So I would probably lean more on what Councilor Visconti thinks, where he's more actively serving on it currently.
Okay, so we're looking at the end of, correct me if I'm wrong here, November.
Yeah, but middle of November to pick the option, Council Visconti, and
Yeah.
then end of November to authorize submission of the report.
Seems okay. I don't think that would be a problem.
And Council Visconti, you were one of the people that in the coming weeks I wanted to reach out to, and I think probably in June, I'd like to do an update with either Ways and Means or the council, get them something to chew on in advance, probably the latest and greatest version of this. And I'd like to engage the council or Ways and Means, and I think me and you should have some discussions first of just, how often do you want updates? Do you want to report? Are there specific items? Do you want me at every meeting? But certainly that's sort of why I highlighted this. I want to be in front of the council June, July, August, September, October, and really just sort of creating the runway for when we blitz through all these meetings, everybody sort of knew what was coming.
Fantastic. All right, we can talk offline about the amount of times, coming up in front of the council and letting them know and keeping them in the loop as well. Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem, but I can discuss it with the counselors as well, and we can get back to you on that.
I think that'll be helpful because I think even, when I think back to last August, I know that the counselors felt very rushed as we were asking them to make decisions and that they weren't having enough time to really vet the materials we were giving them. I think even if they had this timeline paced out in advance, they could at least anticipate and even push on us if they feel like they're not getting the information they need with enough advance notice.
Sure.
And I think that'll be helpful.
I agree. I think we should give them as much advance notice and keep them up to speed on everything that's going on. So yeah, we can discuss how many times they want you in front of us, but that makes sense.
Okay. So just high level reminder, PSR, the phase we're in now, is investigate the options and pick one. SD is then schematic design, is push that option forward to a schematic level. And the schematic design is what sets up the vote to move forward into a new project. So into a funded project. So this all ripples down to actual, like some point in the middle of July would be an actual debt authorization vote. And everything below this black line would be, we're out of feasibility study now. We're working on a fully funded, fully approved project. So the black line is feasibility versus design and construction. So this last part of the schedule ultimately will be pages long, but for right now, again, everything below the line, most in flux. Depending on what we learn in the next 12 months, these dates could change, but right now, we'll go from the schematic phase into the design development phase after project approval, after the debt authorization vote. The design development phase, we're gonna work this out a little more with Dan and his consultants, but we have right now plugged about 5-ish months for the design development phase. And at some point near the end of that phase, let me pause for a second. We the project team, this is an important point, and it's one of the ones I want to get on everybody's radar, including the council. Until we learn more about Article 97 and what the state is going to require, we are assuming, I want to stress it's an assumption, that we are going to have to replace Ericola and Ambrose Park before we start building on them. That's the most restrictive version of the state Article 97 process. They might not say you can take those parks offline and build on them for 5 years, then put them back. We're right now assuming that they're going to tell us you have to get a new park online that's the same size and has the same amenities before you can put a shovel in the ground. So again, that's right now the most conservative assumption we can put in front of you. But by the time we're down into SD, we want to have a much more defined answer of that. So it's quite possible that that's not the case, and we can better some of these dates. But for right now, from the most conservative advice we could give you, we're assuming that we're going to have to replace that park. So we're aligning the end of the design development phase with a bid deliverable for the design team to show us a new park. My assumption right now is that's going to, if we have to build it in advance, it's going to have to go at Wonderland. There's nowhere else to put it. It would be temporary. This is a huge topic that we're going to have to do a lot more discussion with folks from the state, the city, parks, the school about, but we wanted to start at the most conservative position. So end of DD, we were looking for bid documents to build a new park. So that's why these two dates are green here. We're looking in December to have a bid set to build a new park, bid it over the winter, and by spring 2025, be building that new park down at Wonderland, getting it done by the fall, opening it up in the fall of 25, and allowing us to start on-site construction, take over Ambrose for temp parking, take over Aracola for site work, looking to start in September of 2025. 3-year plus or minus construction duration gets us out to September 2028 occupancy. But we then have to knock down the old building, which probably will be a through the winter 28 into 29 activity. And following up on the heels of that, as land is exposed for site work, immediately start site work. So the building would start coming down in chunks and new site work would be filling in after that. So that really means about 3 years to build the building, then another year to knock it down and build the fields. That means at this time, once the new fields were open, September 2029, the temporary fields that, again, I'm assuming are going to have to be at Wonderland if we have to do that. We can decommission that park and start the MSBA audit process, which unless MSBA clears their audit backlog, we're assuming could take upwards of a year. And really all this MSBA audit process, the project is done, but they're going to withhold 5% of their total grant to Revere until the audit's done. So really what it means, and this is something we'll work out with Rich, we'll have it baked into the cash flows, but once you get to 95% of your grant, that the grant's established back in here, back in these, based on this project scope and budget and the debt authorization, that'll cut off when you hit 95% and you will not get that money, that 5%, which will be millions of dollars on this project till the audit's over. So hopefully the MSBA can clear their backlog that developed in COVID. And this is not a year-long process, but it's noteworthy for Rich because it affects borrowing. And just a quick note for Rich, one of the things we'll be working on as these numbers come together, if I scroll back up, once we really get into estimating back in here in September, that's when I'm going to be updating the cash flows for real. Rich, I can give you some assumption of cash flows before then, and maybe that's a good idea for us to do to reset to the schedule, but we won't really be able to plug in real numbers till we're done with this estimating process. And really then the committees then pick which option you want because they're all going to have a slightly different budget. So I'll work with you, Rich, just to get you some plug for a cash flow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
A note on that, Brian. I'm trying to reconcile in my head how we didn't get to the conversation about financing the project that we had last year until after design and development and all of that had been done. And I know one of the things that we've been thinking about, and we're going to have an internal city meeting on Monday about this, but really trying to figure out what the city can afford when, so that the building can be designed to a number in the reverse order of what we did last time.
Yep.
So I don't know, what impact does that have on this timeline? When would people need to have that kind of a number from Rich in order to do the design stuff? And how does that all play out here, I guess, is my question.
So my suggestion is that's excellent homework for May and June, because we're really going to be looking at the options and presenting them to you on a high level between now and next month. And if maybe in June, or about in concert with when we're showing you, here's some options, which one do you really want to dig in on? If we have a total project budget to go by, we can spend these months designing to that budget. And I know that's something Joe Lewin's brought up before. It's something that we agree with. So if in the next month and a half, if there is a not to exceed budget, and there's a budget that works for the city, we can really spend time designing to that before we're estimating in September. So it's a little bit late if it happens in September, because we've already done a good deal of the design on the option. So I would say that's excellent homework to work on in the next 3-4 weeks.
It'll be much better process for us to forecast once the budget's passed for fiscal year 24, because we'll have real 24 numbers, and then we can build upon that. So I think that timing, Brian, will work well right after the end of June when the budget's passed. Then we can really start doing some precise forecasting, because those numbers will be set in stone.
Yep.
Brian, I think it makes sense for the design team, you guys, and maybe we even get Consigli involved to give everyone here a list of the things that need to be considered, because it's beyond just the building.
Mhm.
So the budget needs to include the park relocation, the phasing of it, the demolition of the existing. There's a list of things. So what we don't want to have is be captured with too low of a square footage number that doesn't capture any of the culverts or any of these other issues that are on the site that need to be dealt with.
Yep. I agree, Dan. And I think that's going to take over some of our regular bi-weekly meetings, with the city, and certainly with the internal to us, the meetings we'll be running. But I think it's a great point, Dr. Kelly, and that will make the landing down here on the runway a lot easier. It'll, if we have a number that we can work to, and it's a number that we can achieve while still, reaching the school and the city's goals, it's going to be a much easier runway here to land the plane at the end of the feasibility study.
Okay, I just want to highlight one difference that I just heard between what you said and what Rich said. I heard you say May, June. And I heard Rich say after the budget season, after June, is that right?
I think June 24th. I think June 24th is the estimated date of the budget passing.
Okay, and so you want to wait until then, Rich, to start looking at the what the city can afford. Is that right?
Well, once the entire budget's set, I'll have exact 24 numbers to put in the forecast, and then I can extrapolate off of those.
Okay, so we're probably looking very end of June or early July, Brian, for your.
Yep.
Yeah, we might be able to hedge it a couple of days, but I think that's the logical place to start once the budget's submitted and passed.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I will have like a few assumption versions to you before then, so we could plug them in right away. And then as sort of the estimating happens a little further into, September, we can tweak that cash flow. But I don't think that time frame is too bad. But we start with the general ideas and work them down into details. So if we have July, August, September to work with a real number, that's fine.
Okay, that's great.
Hey, I gotta jump to a 6:30 meeting, but I just had one quick question I think I'm not clear on. Because we are establishing feasibility study and we appropriated those dollars, are we still subject to reimbursement for the second feasibility?
I don't think the MSBA is going to reimburse for the $2.3 million budget. It's something we'll find out for real at the June board meeting when they hopefully approve this whole process. But my assumption has been that they're only going to participate in feasibility study 1, Rich, and we'll show the feasibility study, the 2.3 million is totally non-reimbursable.
That's generally how it works when you do this.
All right, well, that'd be great to know, because that would be dollars that we recoup, we can repurpose back to the project.
Yep. So that was really it. Any other questions on schedule? Otherwise, I just think Dan wanted to give you a little preview of what's coming and getting some of these working groups really kick back in gear to support advancing these designs.
Yeah, I don't have much. We just restarted back up. But our intention is to bring the precedents showing the higher building and other, those kinds of design moves to the next building committee meeting in 3 weeks. And to also start to bring some options, to bring the things that we're looking at and working on, and so that everyone here can see them and start to react to them. That being said, we also would really like to set up kind of an executive design kind of committee that made up of whomever that you all wish to have on this, that would meet every week, the week after the building committee meeting, and give us further kind of input and further direction so that we have time to develop things for the next upcoming building committee. So we're thinking of like an every 3-week cadence for building committee meetings, and then that week after would be this design group. And that design group would be a mixture of, previously we had an interior design group, an exterior design group. We're thinking this time we just have one group. That's the design group. That's one group that we want to set up. And then Brian mentioned the site working group. I think that's probably largely going to be the same members as before. We wanted to start that back up soon. Hopefully we can start it back up in the next week or two. You can always add people to it, of course. And then we would have the mechanical, electrical, plumbing working group, which was under Carl. That one's going to really be a revisit of what we've already done and just a reconfirmation for this process of what we're doing. So there's not a lot there other than reconfirming everything that's already been done and agreeing that that's what's going to be in this next iteration on the existing school site.
Is the option for geothermal wells out on this site? Or
Nope.
is that still an option?
No, we were still going that way.
Oh, good. Okay,
So,
awesome.
yeah.
I think I could get together with Chris Bowen and talk to him about putting together the design team. And if anybody who's on the building committee wants to be on that as well, let me know. And we'll add you, but I'm thinking we should have a couple teachers take it over this time. There's a lot of information already shared on what the program is and what we need for that. So I think that'll be helpful. But I can talk to Mr. Bowen tomorrow about putting a couple people together to work on that.
That sounds good, Diane. We can talk about that.
And would the assumption be correct, Dan, that we could kind of use the same materials that we had picked for the last version? Like, I mean, obviously it's not going to be exactly the same because the building structure is going to be different, but I think the work that team did looking at like the sea glass and capturing Revere Beach and the wave and all of that, like, could we plan to mimic that somehow?
Well, maybe we can think about bringing those back in, but I'd really like to get these new things out there too.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
try to have everyone react to what this is, because I think this might be different than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a different location. It might be a different kind of feel and a different look, a very different looking building that might have a different, everyone might feel a little bit like something out like that. Some of those ideas are great and they should be incorporated, but there might be some other things that would work better when you're a little further away from the beach.
Makes sense.
I'd like to suggest, and this is just my suggestion, and obviously it's up to the committee, that during this design process and the meetings of these various committees, there's an effort almost like an ongoing value engineering process. So as you're discussing various design elements, you're also talking about the cost trade-offs of design elements. And the reason I bring this up, and this is just instinct, it's not based on any knowledge of what's to come, but I see an expensive project here with such a confined site and all the issues around it. So I think that having a good sense of what the trade-offs are, not after you do a final estimate and go through VE, but sort of along the way when decisions are made, in my view, is probably going to be necessary. We're trying to build something on the existing site.
Joe, to that point, that was one of the reasons why we're thinking hard about hire.
I understand, Dan, and I don't see any, I mean, even if it wasn't a cost issue, I don't know how you squeeze that old building, the previous building on this site.
Yeah, I mean, there could, I think there's gonna be some positive trade-offs that, you know, we may be able to avoid some of the culvert and complications.
Yep.
You know, by making a more compact footprint, avoid some of the other, some of the phasing, the logistics issues will become a little easier. So I think that's one of the reasons we're really kind of thinking that maybe we should give a real fair shake to a taller option.
Yeah, and you know, I don't really know. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but from what I've seen in terms of the pantheon of challenging sites, this is right up there.
Yep.
That brings us through 5. Any other schedule questions or general questions from the committee before we go into 6, 7, 8? Seeing none, I will see if anyone has public comment, name and address. If so, going once, going twice. I do not see any. I see a Ralph DeChico hand up.
Recording in progress.
Ralph, do you have a question? You're muted.
Hi, Ralph. Can you hear me?
Yep, got you now.
Ralph, 49 Washington Street, Revere. I just want to make a public comment. I'm I was one of the proponents for Wonderland. I hate to see any of the delays, but I know the biggest point is to get this passed. But I'm for the way that I would want to be until the new council is in, since it's an election year. To see if for any votes or anything, I'm going to after January, because I am a proponent of thinking that we.
Ralph, you broke up a little bit at the end of that. You want to repeat the last end of that?
Hopefully that comes through okay.
I think we got.
Did I come through okay?
Yeah, I think we lost you at the very end for like a sentence. Okay.
Did I come through okay?
We lost the end of what you said, Ralph. We didn't get the last like sentence or two.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't know where I got lost. Of course, I'm on a phone, but I just wanted to say I'm just hoping that if we go to a new council, there's still hope to go back to the old Wonderland site. I just see the cost going to the old high school site is just going to be so astronomical, and we're going to be wasting so much money trying to see that. It's going to cost too much money there. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yep.
Any other public comment? I think that's it. Any new
Just
business? Good.
one item under other business. I said this earlier in the meeting, but just to formally include it in the minutes, that Jennifer Hayes has resigned from the committee. And I've already communicated that to Linda. And I'm going to work with Chris Bowen and our other principals to identify another parent to be on the committee. And we're actually going to try to seek out somebody who has kids in the elementary or middle level who would want to be on this job, which Jen did. Her kids were in elementary school, but we'll find another parent who can serve, who would be invested in the project for their family. And as soon as I have that name, I'll share it with the committee and then update the MSBA on the new structure of the building committee.
Sounds good to me. There's no other new business. We're just looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
you. We will do one last roll call to get everyone out of here. Mayor.
One question on that, Linda. I don't know that we need to do a roll call for ending a meeting. Can we just say anybody opposed? And if anybody does,
I've had other-
Offending me.
That works in other municipalities we work in. I see a lot of exactly what you just said, Dr. Kelly.
yeah, we don't do it for school committee. I don't believe the city council does either. They just, once there's a first and a second, someone bangs a gavel and that's it.
I feel like we did enough roll call exercising tonight
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm in desperate need of some water after that one, yes.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
If there's no opposition, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks.
Recording stopped.